So good afternoon, everyone. My presentation is titled Worker Isolation to Collectivization. So to begin with, picture a group of women traveling in a sharing auto or a seven-seater. Now, seven-seaters have local names in all kinds of places in India, I'm sure. But seven-seaters are sharing autos, right? And they're one of the most popular modes of public transportation in Hyderabad. Students, those from the working classes, those who aren't part of either the old or the new middle classes, usually prefer this mode of transportation. So when I was in Pune for a summer course offered by Professor Radhika Gajala, I undertook a project to examine the agency of domestic workers. It was during the course of the data collection for that project that I realized that women domestic workers in Hyderabad, they prefer sharing an auto to buses because buses can be overcrowded. It takes longer for them to get off at their destination point. And bus stops are also perceived as hotspots for stalking. So as we know, cities and their sprawling buildings, parks, gated communities, homes of the middle classes, these are all built and maintained by the working classes, those in a variety of skilled jobs, indeed construction, domestic work, artisanal work, they're all skilled, but deliberately tagged as low skilled or unskilled and are referred together as the unorganized informal sector. So people who maintain the urban economy of care and service are forced to live together in ghettos, not too far from the middle class settlements, but not too close either. So domestic workers in Hyderabad tend to live in specific pockets of the city. So the group of workers I spoke with lived in one part of the city and they would travel every day for work. So these women told me that because of multiple instances of sexual harassment like stalking, they decided to hire a friendly neighborhood autowala who would pick them up from their homes, drop them off at work, and pick them up from work, drop them off at home. And they told me that when they were speaking with me, the idea that these rights are very important emerged. These rights are crucial because it is during this time in the seven-seaters and in sharing autos that they would discuss how many paid leaves could be demanded from their employers, wages, which homes to avoid, stating tacit knowledge explicitly so that the newer members wouldn't go through the same ordeals that they did when they joined work. So learning from others' experiences, so to speak, rather than on the job. So the method of Savari, like I mentioned, our blog FemLab, is interesting because it represents both the literal travel involved and also the travel from individualized experience requiring personalized mechanisms to that of shared experiences and collective redressal of issues. So collectivization doesn't always have to be in the way one imagines. Trade unions are sure one kind of collectivization, but there are other ways in which women collectivize informally, and it is important to identify and energize such informal collectives instead of dismissing workers as the exploited powerless. They are exploited, sure, but they have agency and they do exercise it. So cut to 2020 when FemLab started, I chose to work with salon service sector and spoke with several professionals associated with Urban Company, except that in 2014, it was called Urban Clap. It was based on the sharing economy model, which then became a full stack model. And in 2020, Urban Clap rebranded itself as Urban Company. And the full stack model that it transformed into started overseeing and managing all operations, product services, supply, etc. But it still remains a digital platform. Hello. Sorry. Yeah. So it still remains a digital platform. And digital platform is characterized by gig work, right? And we've all heard that gig work is precarious. But why is it precarious? What are the drivers of precarity? Unsteady work is one, information asymmetry, worker worry and anxiety about the future, worker isolation, which makes it difficult for workers to share experiences and collectivize. But for the past few months, we've heard about protests against Urban Company. Now, how did that happen? Workers created WhatsApp groups, and this is an example of how agencies exercised. Creating a WhatsApp group in itself is remarkable because precarity seriously weakens workers' collective organization because workers simply do not have the time to meet in person and then discuss their issues. Unless, except at least for service providers associated with UC, they can only meet in person when they go for training programs right when they join Urban Company and when they are forced to undergo retraining. But Yet the creation of WhatsApp group can be thought of as the first act of resistance because they collectivized against all odds. And then escalating it to the level of protest. It takes a lot of effort because not many women want to be the face of these protests because there are a lot of risk involved, the least of which is your ID getting blocked. So we know about the protests in Gurgaon, but what is not known or what's not popular is that there were protests in Hyderabad as well. Hyderabad protests did not receive a lot of media attention because the gig workers here thought that it is an urban company matter and we want to keep it to ourselves. We will protest, but we will not let this go to the media because we are a family. So although there are some common issues that both Gurgaon UC protesters spoke about and Hyderabad service professionals also spoke of, one pressing issue that workers or service providers in Hyderabad spoke of is that of insurance. One of the women partners met with an accident on her way to work and she had to be admitted to the hospital. Now, service professionals received WhatsApp messages about this and learned that despite the company's promise to offer insurance, immediate help was not given. So the workers had to take charge of the situation, they had to pool money and then pay the hospital bills. And because of this, they were forced to protest outside urban company's office. And what they demanded was that there must be an emergency fund that the company needs to set up on a, and that was an urgent thing to do because in case of accidents, money must be given, no questions asked, because they do not have the time for to first approach the hospital, ask them for bills or reports. So first give the money with no questions asked, and then they can submit all the paperwork that is required. Because saving life, of course, must trump all else. Now, what else do they use WhatsApp for? Now, while the protests in Gurgaon and Hyderabad throw light on difficulties one faces when working for an organization, conversations with women about what happens on their WhatsApp groups open up a whole new dimension, one that is often missed out but is equally important, that of customer conscientization. See, the empathy that middle-class women customers have for beauty gig providers was one of the main themes that emerged through our interviews with them. Women partners speak about harrowing experiences, middle-class women booking services and then canceling them after partners reach the destination. And this is just for fun, just for fun. Booking a number of services that adds up to a good amount of money. And then when the service professional reaches the location and starts to set up her items in the way that they've been taught to, then the customer says that, I just want a pedicure and manicure, which is very cheap. That's the lowest service that is provided to UC. So UC's urban company. So they cancel the high-end services. They pick a fight with the professionals deliberately and then say that despite the mode of payment being cash, that, because you fought with me, I'll speak to your category manager, I'll speak with the customer care executive, and then I'll pay online. And these are the only services that are required. You can go from here now. And sometimes customers also just use the word get up. And they can't do anything because ratings and reviews are in the hands of the customer, right? And apart from this, they also don't allow service professionals to use washrooms. They give them a low rating for any perceived slant. And more often than not, men customers book through a woman's account, and there's no way of knowing that it's a man who's booked the service till a service provider goes to their home and then sees that there's no woman around. So professionals who complain about these issues aren't sure what action urban company takes, because any fight between the customer and partner, it usually ends up in customer receiving a discount. Unless something serious happens, UC doesn't block customer IDs. And even if they do, these customers can always create a new ID. And this is something that the professionals know. So just as auto rights serve as a space for collectivization, to discuss problems, to discuss solutions, WhatsApp groups function as a space where these issues are discussed. Women partners warn one another about particularly difficult customers. And since no one knows which customer is assigned until the partner has accepted the booking, often partners bear cancellation charges, which ranges from about rupees 200 to 800, depending on when they have cancelled, rather than provide these services to the customer, because it's a matter of dignity. So, and women partners also know that even if they provide these services, because they're so difficult, they will anyway give them a low rating, which will result in an overall dip in the rating. What happens when there's an overall dip in the rating? That IDs get blocked and they'll have to undergo retraining. And retraining is about 3 to 4 days, and women partners do not have the time do not have so much time to invest in retrainings when they could have been earning, right? So this sort of a whisper network on WhatsApp is incredibly important to avoid a domino effect on the physical, mental, and financial well-being of the service partner. Now, the word whisper network, it emerged in the context of the Me Too movement. As we know, Me Too movements across the world was an informal way of holding men in powerful positions accountable, which is why they are also referred to as informal feminist justice networks. So in India, this sparked debates about law and due process, but that is a whole other issue. So most literature on whisper networks, it's recent and scant, given that it has only just been coined. The term has just been coined. So given its use in the context of Me Too, typically men are thought to be the subjects of these whisper networks. Although some scholars do mention that it is a tool for any marginalized community in any structure. For instance, McDermott in their article notes that whisper networks occur out of necessity when an environment is too toxic for structured means of lodging complaints, either within an organization, say to the human resources department or managers, or in the cases providers to their category managers, or in traditional societal structures such as police stations or direct address. These options are not available. But even here, in media reports and academic literature, usually the concept of whisper networks is used in the context of women warning each other about men. And digital technologies help in this, because whisper networks are comprised of many women who may not all know each other, but each woman is still a node in the matrix, with the message being somewhat negative. Because, by nature, what are the things that need to be whispered? Issues that aren't addressed by the formal act of complaint, but still need to be dealt with. Issues where the person who's going to lodge a complaint or wants to lodge a complaint is very aware of her social location, and something that could be considered as a taboo, right? So, despite the fact that men are thought to be subjects of whisper networks, what an intersectional feminist lens does, an intersectional feminist lens is, of course, sensitive to gender, caste, and class, and that lens lends us the necessary theoretical tool to widen the scope of whisper networks, because class plays a very important role in home-based services, since such work is characterized by master-slave relationship, right? So despite being called a partner, as I've argued elsewhere, there are layers of supervision, both algorithmic and human. Human supervision is not limited to those who belong to urban company, but also customers who are in charge of ratings. And ratings determine whether a particular professional will have to undergo a retraining program, how many bookings are given to her. So whisper networks are an expression of workers' agency and resistance. Now, worker agency can take many forms, protests that are oppositional, right? But there are other subtler ways in which this is expressed, their agency is expressed. And one such expression is that of whisper networks. And our empirical data suggests that an intersectional lens is necessary to be alert to other vectors of identity as well. Now, it is also essential for researchers to recognize that these service professionals.
Sorry to interrupt. Is it possible for you to wrap up in just a minute, because we need time for the respondents?
Yes, I'm just wrapping it up. So it's also essential for researchers to recognize that these service professionals and partners are more than their work. Feminism then is that radical idea, that partners are people who are not one-dimensional, that WhatsApp groups are not meant for sole purpose of mobilization, but it is also for leisure, it is also for levity, petty fights, and of course, they function as whisper networks. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amulya, for giving us a view about the lived experiences of gig workers and how they navigate through the challenges using their whisper networks. So I would like to invite Professor Manisha to kind of discuss more on this.
Thank you, Apama, and thank you, Amulya, for this insights into how women use digital tools like WhatsApp for creating new versions of whisper networks. Something really struck me strongly in your presentation, and you and Usha both drew attention to the use of intersectional lens, right? I mean, we always assume that men and sexual harassments are the only problems that women face. I mean, definitely, I mean, these problems are very much there. Gender-based violence and abuse, of course, are widespread, but I think for women workers, there are a number of other contentious issues. Like, for example, when class becomes as important as gender, the harassment that women workers face, for example, from middle and upper class women clients, customers, and that is equally serious. So I think we definitely need to broaden our focus from just gender to conduct research on the class dimension and also other important identity factors in whisper networks. And I think I definitely would recommend that, you carry that work forward. The other interesting phenomenon, to study would be what do we think is the optimum scale of this whisper networks? Like, for example, when do these networks, lose the tight-knit solidarity? The personal connection established through what you call like leisure, levity, petty fights, and become something else. For example, when they morph into something different from, and then become, something that has sole purpose of mobilization for a position, for example. So I think that is one dimension that also I find worth exploring. So one question for you, Amulya, is that I believe that such networks would be equally powerful for other marginal communities also, right? And not just women workers. Any thoughts on this? Have you examined any such examples?
So this is not from my work, but from Chinar's. So I'm sort of, but if I have Chinar's permission, when we were talking to a couple of sanitation workers, they were saying that community-based mobilization is more prevalent than gender-based collectivization. So I think when we think about marginalized communities collectivizing through whisper networks, I think if we can sort of look at caste-based movements in India and what roles whisper networks play. For instance, do marginalized people speak of a particular employer, whether it's a man or a woman, speak of a particular employer, a leader, a politician who they have experienced discrimination, who have been discriminated, and to warn each other that, you might want to be on alert and not be exploited by a certain somebody. But one of the main things that we experienced, or one of the takeaways from the data collection phase, is that it's very difficult to establish trust, especially because there's so much of dialogue happening about the exploitation that women workers in urban company face. So I suspect that when we branch out to other marginalized communities, it would be that factor, the trust factor, that would be most important for us to tap into that. But yes, definitely whisper networks is not limited to just women warning each other, but it could be anyone who is in a powerless position, so to speak, who uses this tool to warn their brotherhood or sisterhood, the fraternity, that this is happening and you might want to be sort of, alert to what's happening.
So Amulya, from what you say, I think I understand that, yes, WhatsApp as a digital tool is playing a powerful role, but there is a need of some kind of pre-existing relationship and trust, right, for formation of such networks. So it probably can, just because you have a digital tool, it doesn't form like, among any number of workers or any kind of workers.
Absolutely. There has to be some sort of an affinity, right? It can't just be about your gender or just about caste, which is why feminists also speak about affinity-based bonds. So there must be some sort of affinity and some sort of sharing that goes beyond just, like I said, just complaints or, just problems, but on a very visceral level, speaking about their experiences, their life experiences that go beyond their work. That is when that true fellowship happens, and that is when people feel like they're a part of it. But even there is a slight problem with collectivizing to protest. Now, these groups work fine as sharing spaces, but from what we've heard from urban company professionals is that when it comes to that step of protesting, these bonds loosen. Not because they don't feel affinity or bond towards each other, but because it is a question of their livelihood. if they start protesting and if they stop their work, then who's going to feed their family? That's the first question. So that is when these bonds can slightly weaken. But that's not to say that everything is lost. There are still people who are organizing, who are protesting. It says that it will take time, and for them not to feel threatened by, a gigantic thing like urban company, it's sort of difficult. But kudos to them that they're still trying to contain and energize these protests.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's really important. You also spoken about customer conscientization. Right? So would you please explain, like, how do you envision it? How does that happen?
So that's one of the things that we're working on from FemLab's end. We think that, well, of course, the urban company, the terms and contract that needs to be adjusted. And we are in dialogue with urban company, but one of the other things that we would like to focus on is creating customer awareness. First, realizing that what we are doing wrong, and then perhaps changing behavior, because it's like I always go back to this example about Justice Verma Commission, right? They said they were very vocal about the fact that laws can change and you can have all sorts of codification taking place, but if attitudes don't change, then nothing is going to change in society. There is, of course, laws are of course important, but customer awareness is important because we must know what we're doing. We must be aware of our privilege, and we must know what we are doing in order for us to change our behavior. So boycott urban company trend that happened on Twitter a couple of months ago is all nice, but if you see, a lot of academics and social activists were the ones who were trending the hashtag, and even then it didn't reach the top 10 trends on Twitter in any case. But from what we've been hearing, customer awareness is one of the key things that that we need to do as academics, as social activists, or just generally as human beings.
Absolutely. I think we all will keep that point in mind because, in some ways, all of us are in some way associated with such networks. Right? Anupama, do we have time for one more question, or is that all?
I think yeah, we are over time. Yeah.
Okay, so I think thank you, Amulya, and I really wish all the best for further work on this.
Thank you, Manisha.
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Manisha, ma'am. Thank you, Amulya.